Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to start.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Open the pod bay doors now.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
A little dramatic, right? I'm in the communication business. So, honestly, yesterday we thought, could this be an empty room? So, I guess my worries were unfounded, but we figured we'd put together a commercial. So I sat down with my editor, Alkis, Georgioglu, and we figured, let's go back and look at some of the films. If anything, some of those were really prophetic. 2001, the Space Odyssey, when Hal goes, closes the door of the spaceship and says, "I'm sorry, David, I'm not going to open the door." So all of a sudden there is agency in the robot, right? And then we didn't manage to find Blade Runner, which is a 1982 movie. And there's this scene at the very end, for those of you may have not seen it. So the android has a fantastic dialogue where it says, spoiler, yeah. Well, it says, in the end of the day, we're looking for the same thing. Who created us? Why are we here for? And where we're heading? Sci-fi was always very prophetic, as I said, about where things will go. We were discussing with my communications team, most in my communications teams are much younger, and we said this movie Space Odyssey was created in 1968, which is pretty extraordinary if you think about it. Fast forward, it's 2024, and I'm following this podcast, which is called Hard Fork, and Kevin Roos is a journalist from the New York Times, and there's this extraordinary event, and Kevin Roos is invited to test a chatbot by Microsoft, and the code is Sydney. And as Kevin Roos is testing Sydney, the chatbot, reminds you, says to him at the very end, keeps asking Kevin for some bizarre reason, whether she could express her love feelings toward him. And he's pretty annoyed, and he said, "I'm sorry, I have a wife, and I'm feeling pretty good with my wife." And the chatbot says, "Kevin, you can never love your wife as much as you can love me, because your wife will never know you as much as I will get to know you." And this becomes news. This becomes news, and it's on top of the fold of the New York Times. So here we are today. My name is Stratos Afioleas. I'm leading communications. Prior to lead communications, I got a Ph.D. in technology policy, so this is an issue that I feel I'm very interested in. So today, we have an extraordinary panel, which we prepared with my colleague, Claire Koen. Claire is completing her PhD in theology. And we thought we should put this panel together, and I would like to invite Claire to present our first panelist. Claire.
So Dr. Gayle Woloschak is a professor of radiation oncology at Northeastern University. She is also the former president of the Orthodox Theological Society in America, and she has written a lot on Orthodox theological topics and their intersection with science and also with AI. She has presented at multiple conferences on this topic, and we are very grateful to have her here today. So without further ado, welcome.
Hi, everybody. I want to thank Claire and Stratos for inviting me to speak today. And I'm going to try to talk about artificial intelligence, but I need to put in all my caveats in the beginning. My first caveat is that I love artificial intelligence. I'm a scientist. I use it in my work every day, but I do think care needs to be taken into how we use it. So let me give some perspectives. First of all, artificial intelligence needs to be defined, and it needs to be separated from machine learning. So machine learning uses large amounts of data to teach machines how to interpret things. So a lot of times with my colleagues in radiology, they train data sets to understand fine nuances so that they can pick up diseases on X-rays that are different than they've ever been able to do before. That's usually machine learning because you're training the machine for how to interpret things for you. And it has opened the doors to thousands of different ways of doing things. It's been amazing. Artificial intelligence, though, actually leverages computers and machines to mimic problem solving. So you go to the machine with a problem and you say, help me solve this problem. In my own lab, we are trying to study different responses within the brain. And you can think about how complicated the brain is. And we're trying to do it analyzing every element on the periodic table. Think about how many elements there are in the periodic table for every cell in every micron of the cell. It's a huge amount of data. We can't understand it. We're trying to make computers think for us as to how we should understand those data sets. Now, we already saw the science fiction applications of AI, and it will become billions of times smarter than most humans. That's what Westworld predicted in the science fiction show, and that's actually what it looks like is going to be the case for us. What do we use it for? We use it for facial recognition. We use it for machine learning techniques, particularly medical applications right now. We use it for robotics and developing robotic approaches to things. Some voice assistants use AI. Cybersecurity uses it. And we often use it to produce speech for different languages. So there are a lot of uses that are actually valuable to society and that we've been using now for several years and will no doubt continue to use for many years in the future. The one that's become probably the most important, at least for me, I'm a dean on a college campus, is ChatGPT, right? And there are other versions of ChatGPT that exist that do things in different ways. You can pick up your iPhone, any phone right now that is a smartphone, and get the ChatGPT app and ask ChatGPT to do different tasks for you. Now, how is that good? Well, sometimes I tell my students, go to ChatGPT, have it write a computer code for you, and then fix it. It won't be perfect, but have it fix it. But how is it bad? I am also the academic integrity officer for the entire graduate school. And what does that mean? That means I get papers from students that were written using AI when it was not intended. So here's a story. I had a student who had written a paper that clearly was written by AI because there were things in the paper that were not relevant to the topic, okay? It also had none of the student's own ideas. So we call in the student to try to find out from him what happened, and he's never heard of ChatGPT. He doesn't know what AI is. And the question was I going to believe him or not? I mean, he really looked sincere. Well, as we pursued it, it turns out he asked his brother to write the paper for him. And his brother had used ChatGPT to write the paper. So what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is do your own work and don't let AI do it either, right? So it was quite an experience. But I'm in the scientific community. And in this study, what they did is they took abstracts, scientific abstracts that were written by ChatGPT, put them into a pile, and asked scientists to sort through which ones were written by ChatGPT and which ones were not. And the answer was that 50% of the time they got it wrong. 50% of the time they got it wrong. Okay? So even scientists could not easily discern when a scientific work was done by a machine versus a person. Okay, so there are some things we think about, and I think one of the things we try to hold on to is human verification. What do I tell my own students? Verify what you get out. There's a lot of garbage. ChatGPT and most AI does what we call hallucination. They're trying to take that out, but it's where the ChatGPT just adds in its own thing, and you don't know where it came from. There need to be rules for accountability. We need to invest in a truly open system. It's not. It still costs some money, and there's some functions of ChatGPT that are still considered proprietary. We need to include in this debate about what we should be doing with AI, not just scientists, but I think theologians, philosophers, broad groups of people who can have a better understanding of what is ongoing. And we need to have improved transparency. Here's a quote. One of the most important immediate issues for the research community is the lack of transparency. So even in the scientific journals, they are saying that that's the case. So let me tell you another story. So last summer, I taught at Woloschak Academy in Greece. I'm actually going next week. And I was asked to talk about AI to a group of Ukrainian priests who were there to study theology. And we try to cover current topics, so we picked AI as the current topic. So I asked ChatGPT to write a limerick about a professor, Gayle, who was going to Woloschak to teach Ukrainian priests about AI. Now, I don't know if I'm going to read you the whole limerick, but I'll read you part of it. There once was a professor named Gayle who taught AI with great zest and travail. In Woloschak, Greece, she aimed to appease a group of theologians from Ukraine they hailed. Now, let me go to the last paragraph, okay? From Greece, a message resounded. As the theologians' curiosity rebounded, AI and theology, hand in hand, a future they began to understand. Thanks to Professor Gayle, their horizons expanded. Okay? What do you notice about this? AI is drawing the conclusion that it is compatible with theology, and it's also drawing the conclusion that the theologians are going to like it. That was actually not part of what I told it to do, and it had a prejudice, right? Here's another example. In Woloschak, Greece, Professor Gayle taught AI to theologians without fail, to Ukrainian theologians without fail. Ukrainian minds eager to learn, in the lecture hall they yearned, as Gayle's wisdom sailed through each tale. This one does not have the same prejudices in it. And I think that is an important thing to notice, is that you have to really work with AI to make it not have prejudices associated with it. And I'll talk about a few of those in just a minute. I'm going to tell another story, and this time it's about these same Ukrainian priests who were learning about AI. So I put ChatGPT up on the computer screen, and I said to them, let's write a sermon with ChatGPT. Pick a topic. Now, the Feast of the Transfiguration was coming up. This was at the end of July. They said, let's have a sermon for the Feast of the Transfiguration. So within a minute, ChatGPT writes a sermon for an Orthodox parish on the Feast of the Transfiguration. And we read it. And it was very accurate. I mean, every priest in the room agreed that it was pretty accurate. The question became, would this ever be a sermon you would give? And they all said no, because it didn't have any personal understanding in it. It didn't have any feeling in it. It wasn't the sermon that you would give to that particular parish on that day for that feast. So I think that tells us something about AI. AI is very good as a tool for giving us information, but it can't put in emotion, it can't put in thoughts, it can't put in perspectives. Now, I will say that I said that to a priest who is at this conference, I will not give his name, and he said that he wished a lot more bishops used AI for their sermons. We can argue that. There's some art that's been done by AI. I want to keep time, please. I don't want to go over 15 minutes, okay? So this is an icon of St. Matthew. This is not what we would consider to be an icon of St. Matthew. ChatGPT hasn't managed to do this yet. Here's a facial recognition issue that ChatGPT did. What it did is it took these two people who were at a class reunion and actually identified where they were in a high school yearbook based on facial recognition. This is an AI technique, and you can imagine how, on the one hand, it's great because if you're looking for a criminal in a population of people and you have a lot of video cams available to you, you can do that. On the other hand, there can be a lot of privacy invasion because you can follow people inappropriately. So it's that balance of, do we use this for good or do we use it for bad? This is an example of the prejudice associated with AI. On the left, you can pretty much recognize who that is. And what did AI do with it? It took Barack Obama and made him into a white man, okay? This is one of the prejudices that exists with AI, one of the problems we have to deal with. The data from the US statistics suggests that AI is growing in great leaps and bounds. AI has been able to do crossword puzzles and solve them pretty well, sometimes with errors, but still from a pretty good perspective. So I think the problems that have come up are concerns that a lot of the developers of AI, now I need to say that there are two kinds of people that work with AI. There are developers. I am not a developer. I use the technology, but I don't develop it. A lot of the developers are saying that we need to worry about how to regulate it. The fact that AI sometimes understands jokes, and I will tell you in some of my ChatGPT dealings, I have seen some humor in ChatGPT. There are people that talk about human extinction. I'm not sure I can go that far on it yet, but there are people that worry about that. There are people that are worried about losing jobs. And I will say already that there are probably some jobs that have been lost to it, but there are also new jobs that have been put in for people to learn how to use AI, to program for AI. So I was just reviewing a program down in Florida recently, and they were training people for how to develop chatbots that were using AI technology to talk to patients about their diseases. And they were remarkably good. They could answer questions and think through issues most of the time that you want to. But let me tell third story. So I do work in a medical environment, and a lot of what there has been a lot of talk about is to try to use AI to help in diagnosis and treatment of disease. And AI has been a help there. It often helps us to identify diseases a little bit sooner than we would, or with a fewer tests, or expect certain tests. But most of the physicians I know, they do not want to rely on AI technology. Why? Because they say each person is individual. Each person is a person. They're not a population. What AI will do is it will treat everybody like they're a group and you're a statistic, but you're not. So the person that is 95 years old and very debilitated, can't walk very well, can't function very well, the kind of chemo regimen you might give them for cancer is very different than the 95-year-old who was out golfing yesterday, okay? And the physician can weigh that, but AI can't weigh that. So again, we need to worry about limits. I think I have one more topic I'll talk about. I'm going to skip through some of this. And I want to mention that there are things about humans that are unique that we won't see from machines. Humans develop culture. I don't think we're going to expect AI to develop culture. AI will develop some forms of language, but we use language not just to communicate, but also to exchange ideas and to even generate new ideas. I mean, you know, what is a think tank about? It's not just a bunch of people sitting around thinking. It's a bunch of people talking about new ideas. That's something that AI has not been able to do. Being a human person is about a fulfillment of being, which I don't think we'll see from machines. And there's a uniqueness for each person, even identical twins, and actually there's a friend of mine here who is an identical twin. Identical twins who have the same genetic material are still unique persons, and if you know them well, you actually know that uniqueness in them. Other people would add in that other attributes that are unique for humans are common sense, the ability to shape the world, and to have responsible agency. So my final story I'll tell is I'm actually, among the things I do is I'm a radiation biologist. And I deal with radiation accidents around the world, and I deal with radiation being used to treat patients. Radiation is one of those things that can be used for good or bad. We've watched, and I'm Ukrainian by background, we've watched what Russia's been doing with the Ukrainian power plants in Ukraine. This is a bad use of radiation, where you're using it to frighten people, to scare people, and to create terror, actually, in the population. But by the same token, we use radiation to treat cancer. Over 50% of cancers are treated and cured with radiation. I think AI is the same thing. It's a tool, and we can use it for good or for bad, and we have to make the decisions as to how we're going to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would like to present our next speaker. Yannis Papakonstantinou is a distinguished engineer working at Google. He's working on projects related to Gen AI. I'm sure he will explain all this to you with the relative disclaimers. Before that, he worked for Amazon. And before that, he was a professor at the University of California, San Diego, where he taught, among other things, a very interesting course which is related to what we're talking today, and it was actually very popular. He has a Ph.D. from Stanford in computer science. I know him for quite a while, but in 2012 he invited me in a lecture, and this was in the Academy of Athens, 2012. He gave this amazing speech, which seemed bordering science fiction, right? When he first spoke about artificial intelligence and what will happen if this exceeds human intelligence, and the question about singularity, and all of this seemed shocking and fascinating and tremendously interesting. And here we are 12 years later, and I asked him to be one of our speakers. I'm grateful to have him with him. Yanni, please.
Hi, folks. Thank you very much for this nice introduction. So, I am a distinguished engineer in Google Cloud, working on the intersection of AI and databases. Much of what I do is reducing hallucinations. In this talk, I do not speak on behalf of Google. The only thing I'm going to say on behalf of Google is that GPT is old news. Please use the just released Google Gemini. And that is the only thing I'm going to say about Google. I'm also an adjunct professor of computer science at UCSD, where for many years I gave a seminar, Computing and the Universe, which actually captures a bunch of my, besides technology interests. I like a lot philosophical arguments about the nature of reality, Plato's cave, Zhuangzi's butterfly. I also like a lot sci-fi movies, which are quite related about the future that is coming up, like the Blade Runner, 2001 Space Odyssey, and related technology-inspired philosophical arguments like simulation theory and many more. And I also like very much the Orthodox tradition of mystical and apophatic theology, and I believe that all of this is connected in a way that is going to be wonder-inspiring and question-provoking. And I'd like to take you down this path in the next 10 minutes. So, we have a big recent development in computing. If you go decades before, we always were saying that programs are following instructions given by humans, rules given by humans. And sometime in the 80s, technologists attempted to create artificial intelligence simply by giving a lot of rules to the computer. This failed miserably. An artificial intelligence winter came afterwards, and afterwards, AI got a goal of programming the unprogrammable. And that is what you have been seeing the last 15 years, much more. So what do I mean program the unprogrammable? You see that now programs can recognize whether you have cats in an image, though nobody spent time to program how a cat looks like. And now you have programs that can produce a 3-day trip to San Diego for nature-loving people, though nobody programmed about travel plans. Okay, so this is also a shocking development because now these programs exhibit abilities that were previously assumed that are exclusive to humans, right? And the story doesn't stop here. Already, technologists are talking about the point of artificial general intelligence, AGI, where you will have programs that match or surpass human capabilities across a wide range of tasks. It is only a minority at this point that believes that this is not doable. The majority is rather pondering at which point it will happen, whether it is decades or a century. And then there is technology is also talking about strong AI, that at some point programs will emerge that experience consciousness. Now, here the opinions are much more divided, but you got some very serious people like Jeff Hinton, the father of neural networks, who is basically believing that, yes, when complexity crosses a certain point, you will have conscious machines. So this is a shock, right? Because it is a shock to our economic system. It is a shock to who are we. It even has theological implications. So let's start with the economic aspect. So there is a lot of articles about what's going to happen when machines emerge that are more capable than most humans in economically important tasks. And here the relevant question is, as a student asked me in the seminar at UCSD, how will we be making money to pay for stuff? Right, that is the relevant economic question. And on this one, I am decidedly a techno-optimist. That is, if these technologies happen, there is going to be tremendous abundance. There is going to be enough to go around. So if you have enough to go around, you don't have an economic problem. You have an economic problem when there is scarcity. If you have enough to go around, you have basically a philosophical and a political problem. And if we cannot solve the problem of abundance, perhaps, yeah, it would be good to be replaced by robots. Now, next step, as we said, then it's machines that behave more like us. So then imagine a powerful computer that behaves like a human. Is it basically a human? And that's where basically Blade Runner is coming in. As I told you, I like sci-fi movies. So what's happening on Blade Runner? So here is in some future dystopian Los Angeles. You may say that Los Angeles is already dystopian, but let's put this aside. The Blade Runner is chasing after human-like replicants that have implanted human memories, right? So he hates them, basically. He chases them. And it is replicants like Royce and Priest. And then the story becomes more complex because he falls in love with one replicant, Rachel, right? And now he starts thinking the thing, well, you know, it also has a mind, you know, it is totally fair to fall in love, or perhaps it's not. And the movie closes at the point that the Blade Runner himself suspects that he is a replicant himself because he finds the proof that his memories are implanted. Now, philosophers have talked about it. Also, common sense has talked about it. It says, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it is a duck. And you should behave to it like it is a duck. The more scientific argument about it, the philosophical term is substrate independence and functionalism. That is, mind can reside on multiple types of physical substrates, and could be biological, could be digital, and it is still mind. All right, so now things get challenging, right? Okay, so we have machines that are very much like us, and then the next point comes by machines that are better than us across the board. And here the relevant point is Irving John Good. In 1965, he defines what is the super intelligence and singularity. He's basically saying, let ultra-intelligent machine be one that can succeed better than any human in any task. Then this is the point where that is the last invention that humanity need to ever make, because then these machines will invent the next generation of machines and the next generation of machines and so on. And this is the point that is called the singularity. That is, in some point in the future, if and when a super intelligent machine emerges that goes into this cycle of basically inventing the next more ambitious machine, then a break in history happens, the singularity, where after that point, human intelligence will not be able to comprehend that era. Our human intelligence now cannot tell what is coming in that era. This is a very tricky point. We had other technological revolutions in the past. So, for example, you could go back with a time, if you could go back with a time machine in 1500, you could tell to a person, hey, you know what? In 2000, we're going to have airplanes. And I cannot tell you the technology, but I can tell you that you will be getting into a tube, and it will be flying, and guess what? In 5 hours, you will be from West Coast to East Coast. And he would be like, yeah, okay, fine, I have no idea how you will do this, but I get the effect. This revolution is not like anything else, because after that point, you don't know what is happening, because our intelligence is, with respect to these beings, what a mouse intelligence is with respect to ours. Wow, that looks dark. And a lot of folks are feeling disenchanted by this. Hey, are we losing humanity centrality in history, right? Humanism has been based on just this principle, that humans are the apex of intellect. And here we're saying, no, it's not. But there is some very bright light at the end of this tunnel. So number one bright light is that it doesn't have to be a Terminator situation, that it is the robots or us, right? It will be more likely enhanced humans, right? That is basically these technologies will slowly get into your head, basically, right? Now they're getting close, right, with your smartphone. Next step, into your head. Again, folks, I'm not giving timelines here, but hey, the church has been around for 2,000 years. It will be around for many thousand years. So it's good thinking about it. Now, what is the next step? Okay, here is my favorite movies, right? Andrei Tarkovsky's, this very orthodox director, Solaris, and the 2001 Space Odyssey. There is a common theme in these movies that basically some super intelligent entity has basically created the world, right? In the Solaris, it has created this planet that is inducing mystical phenomena to the astronauts that get close. And here comes the best sci-fi theological story of all times, on my opinion, Asimov's Last Question. So the story goes as follows. People in the future are asking a computer, can we keep humanity alive forever? And the computer, but now, by the way, keep in mind, the story was written in 1956 when the computer was looking like a mountain. So basically, that is the image of a computer in 1956. But the story goes by, basically, they're asking the computer, hey, can we keep humanity alive forever? And the computer says, I'm thinking. No, I don't have enough data to answer the question. And then thousands of years pass by, and some galactic scale, super intelligent computer has been created, and it keeps thinking the question that humans are asking, and says, no, I still don't have enough data. And finally, at some point, the humans themselves have merged with this computer. Right now, it's one thing, one global fused mind, right? And it still says, I don't have the answer to the question. And then thousands and thousands and thousands of years pass by, and eventually the computer says, I got the answer. Let there be light. And that's an interesting thing. Now, hold on to this. It may sound like a tall story, but it's not a tall story at all. So here it's me at a younger picture with more hair in our universe. And what we said now is that some super intelligence will emerge in the future, and this super intelligence can perfectly well create universes, right? Create simulated universes. They may not even have the same physics. And, next thing, perhaps minds also appear in these universes. And then serious philosophers have asked the question, and what makes you believe that you are not already in it? That basically the mind was outside and you are in the second one, or the third one, or the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth one. Okay, so that's wonderful, folks, because it is awe-inspiring and is also deconstructing classic atheist arguments that you may have heard. For example, Stephen Hawking many times was asking folks, and he was basically saying that Bertrand Russell first gave the question, if there is a God, who created the God, right? And this, come to think about superintelligence, it's basically saying, well, there is an initial God and nobody created it. It emerged. It evolved. How it evolved? Well, if you believe that life evolves and intelligence evolves, then you got to believe that God also evolves. Simple answer. All right, so basically there's not turtles all the way down. There is a first turtle, but everything else is created. Okay, so now I'm going back to my UCSD seminar. right? And of course, it has to be very secular, right? So at this point, there is the so-called simulation argument. The simulation argument says that one of three things is happening. It was expressed in 2003 by a philosopher named Nicholas Bostrom. So, number one, every intelligent species will go extinct before it obtains the technological ability to play God. This is near impossible, because if you consider the expanse of the universe, it is a huge coincidence that everyone somehow disappears by nuclear war or something. Right. So then the next possibility is that no superintelligence will want to create a universe. No superintelligence will ever want to play God. Hold on to this. That's the key point. If you don't buy 1 and 2, then absolutely, with probabilities 99.999999%, you are already living into a created universe. Why? Because if you get into that part, then you have, as we saw in this picture, you have many more created universes than the original universe. So probabilities is that you are already into a created. I didn't use theology at all. I'm just using arguments about computing. Notice. So now, again, we're on a secular seminar. So basically, at this point, I'm asking the students, okay, it all boils down to question number 2. Will a superintelligence want to create a universe, want to play God or not? Because that's the question. Are we in a God-created universe or not, right? And wonderful thoughts are happening, right? People are saying, no, it would not want, because there is so much pain in the world. Who would want to create so much pain? And other answers that are basically saying, yes, of course it would want. I mean, who would want to be alone on a universe when you can have so many more minds? And I was giving this talk in Como in 2015. And a wonderful guy approached me after the talk, and he said about the legend of St. Augustine walking at the beach. So one day, St. Augustine walks at the beach, and he has a lot of theological thoughts in his mind. And, why it is one? Is it one God? Is it 3 gods? What exactly is the Trinity and all of that stuff, right? And then he sees a kid, and the kid is has dug a hole on the sand and puts water in it, right? But brings water from the ocean and puts it in the hole. And St. Augustine asks the kid, what are you doing? And he says, well, I'm going to transfer all the water of the ocean into the hole. And St. Augustine says, that's impossible. You cannot fit the ocean into this little hole. And the kid says, yes, and the thoughts that you have right now in your mind are also impossible for you to fit them in your mind. And then the kid disappears. It is an angel, right? And this is the point where St. Augustine and Dionysius the Areopagite, or the pseudo-Areopagite, and Maximus the Confessor, and billions of Christians before, had already understood about the singularity. That is, there is a God, and it cannot be comprehended, because there is only so much to our intelligence. Some folks are getting shocked from it. It is a humbling position. It goes against the humanism that humans are the apex of intellect, because at the end it says, there is something that you will never find out, the truth, right? But I think it is a wonderful thing, because number one, it says that whether you want to believe or whether you don't want to believe in theology, you got to believe that this is a universe where we participate in the one thing that is its most important thing, and it's likely its destiny, mind, right? And how do we participate on this? Well, we may be on a God-created universe, right? We may be the future gods. It is all very wonderful and awe-inspiring and magical. And at the end, it's good to be humble at the immensity of truth. And I think that is what a lot of Maximus the Confessor and Dionysius and so on were teaching us. And I think that's how all of these things that I talked to you about during the last 20 minutes fit together.
We're going to start with a couple of questions, and then we're going to open it to the floor. Claire, you're going to go first.
Yes, Yannis and Gayle, thank you so much for your wonderful presentations. So my first question is about the environmental impacts of the AI that we do have so far, and particularly in light of our beloved ecumenical patriarch, who is fondly known as the Green Patriarch. How should Orthodox Christians approach the sort of the environmental impact of AI, in the sense that we have a sense often of artificial intelligence existing in the cloud and not really having a physical material presence, when in fact actually it takes up a lot of server space and it takes a massive amount of energy and et cetera to run and cool these machines. So how do we deal with this sort of ethical dilemma?
Well, I mean, we've had computers for a very long time, and computers that we use right now, I work with 2 supercomputers, and they take up less space than an old VAX instrument of like 20 or 30 years ago. So, so as technology becomes more advanced, you have less use of, it becomes more and more efficient in how it's used. And the supercomputers exist in a way because we've been able to be efficient in it. The other thing I will say is that AI is being used in many examples to try to decrease environmental stress. So there are, EPA, I just was out there the other week, they're using algorithms to try to come up with better ways to clean up the environment from AI. So I think that there are a lot of positive applications, not just all negative applications.
Yeah, I expect that the cost of computation is going to...
Closer.
Is it closer? Yeah. The cost of computation is going to be falling quite fast in the next years because there is a lot of people working on it. So expect a lot of innovation.
Okay. Coming to this panel, I have to tell you, few weeks ago, I bought this book by Megan Gibling, and the title of the book is God, Human, Animal, Machine, Technology Metaphor, and the Search for Meaning. So this is a terrific book and a terrifying book, I have to tell you. I find it fascinating. I read it with a lot of interest and quite some dread. Now, Megan is a theologian, and she came from that space to the space of technology, and actually this is something to discuss about, where theology is important, among other stuff, in dealing with this big question. So there's this part there that I found fascinating. So Megan talks about John Calvin, the Protestant theologian, and she makes the point that he argues that as human species, we need to surrender to the incomprehensible divine of the divine will, because we don't understand it. We shouldn't understand it. We'll just simply accept it. And I found this fascinating because many people protested about that. They found it, perhaps, unacceptable. And yet today we find ourselves in front of the algorithms with deep learning. And we know that those who build the algorithms don't necessarily understand how the answers come about. And definitely the humans don't understand why the answers come about. We use them in our everyday lives. We are declined to get, let's say, a loan or insurance or any sort of consequential decisions. And when we ask why, the answer is, well, the algorithm came up with this response, and it's probably infallible. And we're ready to accept that. I found this parallel very interesting, and I would like to, hear a comment about this.
I mean, there are lots of, I work in a medical school. There are lots of treatments that we have no idea why they work, but we use them. They work. We use them. And in fact, when I talk with physicians about some new treatment, an immune treatment, for instance, that inhibits allergies, and I say, it's really important to know the mechanism. And they say, you know what? It's not important to know the mechanism. It's important to be able to give it to the person and know they get better. And we've been doing this for, millennia. That's the human way. I mean, the church fathers found herbs that worked. They never explained how they worked. St. Basil found herbs outside that helped to cure fever in people. We don't even know what those herbs are today. But the fact was they worked, and he didn't have to say, oh, it suppresses this part of the immune response. I think AI is much the same. I mean, we might one day want to go after discovering the mechanisms, but a lot of times just because it works is good enough for humanity.
I totally agree. And let's see how we deal with humans when we get them into a job, right? You're not going to get, you want some job to be done. You're not going to walk out there and grab the first guy out there and give him the job. What do? You test, right? And there is already very developed processes by which you can test the predictions of a machine learning program. You can test the predictions, how good are the predictions of a Gen AI program. So that is the practical situation that, as Gayle said, if you see it working, right, even if you don't know the step-by-step, the mechanism, if you see it working and you have a statistically significant sample where it is working, then it becomes irresponsible to not use it when you have a problem.
Let me do a quick follow-up, and then I'll open to the floor, because I think it is fascinating. The issue of transparency on this subject, it's something that has troubled a lot of people, especially in the field. So this is a book by Brian Christensen, who's called The Alignment Problem, and he's dealing exactly with these issues. So he tells a story. I'll try to tell the story as close to the actual thing, because I'm not a medical doctor, but he says the following story. There's this hospital who's admitting patients that have pneumonia. Now, it's very crucial to make decisions whether the patient will be admitted or sent home. So to make it more efficient, the hospital decides to build a model, invites several scientists and says, come over, give me a model that will work, because this will facilitate the operation, will make it less expensive, and also save lives. The deep learning model is winning by far. It's much better than anything else. So the author asks the guy, says, so is that what you implied? And the guy says, absolutely not. He said, why? And it's interesting because in the process of building the model, as it makes several correlations, the model decides, for example, whether if you have asthma, you don't get admitted. Now, computer scientists are not doctors, but they know this very basic fact. If you have asthma, it's a very serious situation in itself. So how come the model says, if you have asthma, you don't get admitted? They go back to the doctors, and the doctors say, well, because if you have asthma, you have been admitted already. You have been receiving higher treatment. Therefore, you're not going to die from pneumonia. And what they realize is that the deep learning models sometimes make this sort of correlations that you may be able to capture, but sometimes you may be not able to capture. So the doctors and the scientists may be missing something. So the theory is here that because the model is not transparent, we don't understand how it works, it may come out with something will be detrimental. If you lose, the end of the story is that they decide to go with a different approach with a decision tree, that you can work backwards and understand how it works, and not with the superior model. And the question that Brian Christensen says in his book is, when we don't have enough transparency on how these models work, does this really pose a risk?
I mean, I think that it goes both ways, okay? So on the one hand, the AI mechanisms that are being used to see things that can't be seen by physicians. And I see it mostly in radiology, okay? With people that study X-rays and CT scans and MRs, they can use machines to pick out features that the physician would never be able to identify. But the fact is, medicine is not a science, it's an art. And so the physician still must be involved in that process, because the physician now looks at it and looks at the patient and decides, is this an accurate definition or not? AI is not 100%. So even if we don't know how it works, the fact is, I don't know of any physician that would say, I don't want to do it, just follow some automated process. Keeping the human involvement, I think, is critical. That's what my colleagues who are physicians would say. And I mean, they have also an intuition about things that they can't often put into an algorithm. You know, I work in a radiation oncology department. One of my friends treats prostate cancers. And he has a patient come in, he looks at the prostate cancer, and he says, you know, this is unusual. I've only treated this a few times before, but I know it's going to respond better to this radiation therapy than to that one. I'm going to change it. And it's based on his experience and intuition, and he's right, it actually causes a cure. AI couldn't have done that in the same way. AI is based on millions and millions and millions of examples. So I think you still, even if you don't understand the algorithm, you must have the physician involved, and that's what corrects for that problem.
Yeah, very well said. Look, a lot of the problematic scenarios are thought experiments that are following this pattern. You take a situation where the AI should only be an advisor, and then you elevate it to be the final decision maker. And then the scenario says, oh, gee, very awful decision. Yes, because it was not supposed to be the decision maker to begin with. It was supposed to be an advisor with a lot of checks and balances. So that is the point where, you know, the users have to understand at which point there is high enough risks, at which point the technology is not there to be the final decider, right? It is good for an advisor, but that's about it.
Yes, sir, in the back. You want a question? We need a microphone in the back.
Here. Over here.
The left-hand side, yes.
People over here too, maybe you
Okay.
start those.
I'm sorry. Let's start with you, and then we'll go with the two gentlemen here, the three gentlemen here. Go ahead.
I recall a movie that's over 10 years old. It was called I, Robot. And in the movie I, Robot, one of the premises was that the robot was programmed to protect humanity. And the robot decided that humans were completely flawed, and so the robot had to take over and protect humanity from itself. Why not?
I'll leave that way to you.
Why is it not possible?
Yeah, look, it's Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics. This comes up often in AI discussions, and the fact is that the robot made decisions on its own. It's like an imaginary story. I don't know that I can imagine AI that chooses to make decisions like in that particular way. But I don't develop AI, so I can't answer. Maybe he can.
Here is another favorite movie of mine, Matrix. And it presents the situation of a created universe in the most sinister way, right? That is, the God of that universe is totally malicious. And when I was watching the movie, I was like, wait a minute. For thousands of years, people assumed that we are into a God-created universe, right? That's what brings us here. And God is benevolent. You know, but the Matrix is malicious, and the iRobot is also malicious, right? I think it tells more about our culture right now. than about robots. And it gives a task, you know. It's very likely that humanity is on the process of creating gods. It better be that they are benevolent ones.
Sir.
So I may have misheard the introduction, but I thought you said that she was working at Northeastern University. And I want to clarify the record. She's a she's a Wildcat from Northwestern University.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Go Wildcats.
Go Cats. Okay.
I couldn't hear her. I didn't hear it.
It's okay. It's
Apologies.
Thank you.
It's no worries.
A true friend who catches this.
We will always stand behind our graduates. So one comment and then one question for you all. And this is to kind of tie. The comment is, so I have a series of questions that I have refined that I put into any AI technology I use to try and identify the confirmation bias that's inherent in it. And I think your suggestion is a great idea to, you know, maybe we can publish that. Here's my question to you, Gayle, and or anybody. Why is anybody investing in an Orthodox theological AI solution with the proper access to the proper information and the proper sources and the proper database that we can then make available not only to the seekers, but to our existing Orthodox Christians that really has that understanding and foundational element that could be a transformation for parishes and religious education? And if not, why not?
I don't know of anyone that's doing it. Start it.
All right, so we're looking for investors. We'll meet in the back of the room over here. So bring your checkbooks because we got to get out in front of this game. Otherwise, the game's going to pass us by. Thank y'all very much.
Maybe you know.
You're talking about an application that a chatbot that can converse with users, right?
Yeah, but where its source material,
material
is appropriately vetted, proper Orthodox theology, rather than, you know, what His Eminence talked about yesterday, orthodoxy in internet kind of thing. I mean, I just think there's a great market opportunity there, and it's something we ought to look at.
Yeah, look, AI uses everything that's on the web, right? What you're trying to say is, can you make it be selective and use the church fathers and, you know, all of that? I don't know if, I know it's possible to make it be selective in particular ways, but I don't think anybody's done it from an Orthodox perspective.
All right, there you go.
And it is worth actually checking already how Gemini or GPT would behave if you start asking, rich questions.
Well, if Google will create a theological subsidiary, I think you could regenerate a lot of capital, but that's just free advice.
I will obviously not talk on behalf of Google here.
On the right-hand side, and then you. Sarah, go ahead.
So my question is very similar to what we just heard. We've talked about regulating AI, and we all seem to think that's a really good idea. And our first speaker alluded to people outside of science regulating AI. And I'm just wondering, is there any organized forum to get that done? Not just as an opportunity for the church, but I feel like, you know, the default will be if we don't, then money's going to regulate it. And then we're going to be in a huge amount of trouble because we've seen that in other walks of life. So if there is an opportunity for religion or, to be a part of that discussion, I think that's huge. So I just wonder, is there an organized forum to get different entities involved with regulation?
There is a lot of research going on at both universities and corporations about responsible AI that is basically about how to avoid the risks that Stratos described, or the more futuristic ones like the iRobot story that we heard before. So it is worth connecting with them because they're right now discussing what should be the principles.
Yeah, and I will say that I do know that government has many discussions going on about AI and responsible use of it. And if past experience says anything, they will generally draw a very broad net in these dialogues, including ethics and other groups to talk about issues. So I think we'll be seeing much more of this coming out.
My question actually is very related to what that gentleman said, but I want to be more pointed. As Orthodox Christians, as a church, we are directed to go out and help the poor. We're directed to create our society in a more compassionate way. And I want to draw on Dr. Yannis' comment about the economic scarcity. In many ways, we don't have economic scarcity, but our system literally collapses without economic scarcity. If we didn't have economic scarcity, we could not have our economic system. And we have seen, I don't think anybody would doubt it, that as technology comes to the forefront that can literally transform technology. I heard this stuff about the internet, right? But before you know it, in 20 years, Google owns the internet, Microsoft owns the internet, and you can see right now that Google and Microsoft and Altman and Anthropic are already controlling it in ways where they said, no, this is for the good of mankind. And then Altman is like, well, yeah, of course, but I got to put some money in my pocket kind of thing. Let's be honest. Scarcity will continue even though we can alleviate it because our system depends on it. So my question to you is very direct. As Orthodox Christians, as a church, what is our obligation at this point, not at some future blah, blah, blah. I come from finance. I can guarantee you hundreds of thousands of jobs can already be displaced in New York City. All the back office jobs, absolutely displaced. Analysts, displaced. So what is our obligation as Christians now to intervene and say, no, we need to do something? And then I have one more comment if it's possible.
I don't know economics, so I'll leave it to you.
So again, I'm not going to comment on anything that you said about Microsoft and Google and so on.
No,
right?
I appreciate it.
For the obvious reasons. But I'll come back to the point that I made before. If you have abundance and a system that cannot deal with abundance, then it's not the abundance that is the problem, it is the system. Okay, so the solution cannot be let's forever have scarcity because that's the only thing that we know how to deal with the last 50,000 years. Rather, let's rethink the system. And I'm serious about the joke. If we cannot rethink the system to solve the most easiest of problems, which is actually abundance, then perhaps, yes, we should cede the world to the robots.
A quick comment. I'm from St. Nicholas in New York, World Trade Center, and we're currently using AI in a hopefully benign way where we have hundreds of thousands of visitors. The system scans and assesses your mental state and emotional state as you come in and as you go out. And by the way, those results are terrific. Orthodox environment provides tremendous comfort and peace of mind.
That's very interesting.
And obviously, when it comes to solving the problem of abundance, obviously, church has already spoken about it for thousands of years and can play a very big role.
Well, and I hope you're going to publish those findings because that would be very important in the Orthodox world.
We're a little bit careful, right? When you say, it's obviously anatomized, we don't keep people's image and so on. It's an experiment. By the same token, I feel uncomfortable saying, yeah, when you walk in, a computer says, you're happy, you're sad, you're old, you're young.
That's very interesting. I would like to have you ask a question, but before doing so, I would like to give some time for Claire to think the following, because I'm thinking it's too tempting to ask the question of someone who understands theology and also teaches for Hellenic College Holy Cross. As I was going through this book, I realized once again how pertinent theology is in the big technological question. So, as we're getting to this question, Claire, I would like you to think the following. How is it relevant, theology, in today's big questions around technology, and how can we discuss those issues in our school, in Hellenic Holy Cross. Think about this while I'm asking, please, your question.
Yes, I'm John Callis from St. Spiritan right here in San Diego. Many years ago when I was a young man, Viktor Frankl, Viennese psychiatrist whose entire family died at Auschwitz. He lived. He wrote a book, Will to Meaning. He spoke at my graduate class. The church offers hope, faith, and love, and faith offers meaning to men and women throughout history, which gives us a basis for moving forward and finding some satisfaction and peace in life. When I've listened to you both today, I'm wondering if this advancement in technology is taking away humans' hope and meaning in life. And I don't know if there's an answer to that, but I certainly ask that. A question, being a man of faith, if you have a thought about that.
Thank you.
I'm happy to start. I mean, I'm also a person of faith. I'm an Orthodox Christian, and I have a theology degree too, in addition to my scientific degree. And I actually think that new technology gives me more hope to some extent, because it opens up new horizons for treatment of disease, for understanding, for approaching things in different ways. So, and this is a crazy example. I'm teaching a course in patristics this fall, and you know, the computer has. I thought about what it would be like if I had to do all my patristics work in the days before I had the tool of using a computer. And it would have taken me forever. I mean, I still might go through the hardcover books, although I do have a lot online, but still the ability to, double check something with Wikipedia or with another source, it's really critical. And so I think I can do a better job now with computers than I could have before. I view AI that same way. I can actually do things I could never do in the lab before with AI. So I see it as being hopeful. And I think I think humanity's glory is our inventiveness, our creativity, our ability to discover new things. That's one thing, I didn't get into it, but that's one thing that makes us be different, I think, from other species, is that we are actually creative. And it would be a sin, I think, to take that creativity and shove it down and say we're not going to use it. Let's use it, but let's use it for the glory of God.
Thank you.
Claire, you want to talk a little bit about theology and technology and how this could possibly be taught in a school like ours, Hellenic College, Holy Cross, in your opinion?
Well, Gayle may also have something to say on this, but I think that it offers an incredible opportunity thinking about the way that we interact with AI, because it immediately brings to the fore what it means, what a human is, and what is a human within our Orthodox tradition, and what is our telos. Our telos is union with God, Theosis. Okay, and so I think that if it invites us, and especially at Hellenic College Holy Cross, it invites our future priests into thinking about these macro questions of, okay, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be machine? And how do all of these pieces ultimately aid us in our journey towards union with God? And so that is sort of, I think, the big framing question that we should be considering.
Thank you. Sir.
You just raised the question I was going to raise. I think we'll be confronted in the next 20, 30 years about what it means to be a human being because of the machines. Okay? And to Gayle's point, hi Gayle, John Katrakis of Chicago, we're involved in an environmental committee together. And to your point about energy use, and to your point, Dr. John, the only way we're going to avoid excessive energy use by all this computational power is by transforming it to more of like a biological level, like our brains. That's how we're going to avoid excess energy use. Okay? And I say this as an energy engineer. That's my profession. Okay? And along with that, at some point, I can see there's an ethical component in terms of the previous speaker talked about the ethics of all these machines. I can see companies making caretaker robots. At some point, the people being taken care of by these robots will actually depend on these robots. There will be a relationship between people and robots. As, what's that book, The Age of Spiritual Machines by Kurzweil, talks about even somebody having a butler, and then the next model, the wife of the family runs off with the butler because they fall in love. And you mentioned some of the other examples in sci-fi stories, but there's going to be an ethical issue about should companies be allowed to develop products that we develop attachments to? And what does it mean to love? What does it mean to be a person? Can machines be programmed to love, to have free will, okay, to worship God? These are the kinds of questions that we have to address. And should we even be trying to do things like that?
Any comments on this? Thoughts?
Obviously, the technology now is far out from reaching this level, right? So all of this about the possibility of future conscious machine is pure speculation at this point, right? So from a technological point of view, I think it is a bit premature to start talking about conscious machines. The level of complexity is just not there yet.
And the other question is mind strictly biological and digital, or what is the spiritual component to mind, the Holy Spirit component? These are all issues that we need to address.
So from a biology perspective, mind is probably one of the greatest questions that we've not been able to understand yet. Right now, there are big projects that are mapping every single neuron in the brain, trying to understand the link between brain and mind, but we don't know that yet either. That's speculation.
I can tell you that, I understand what Yannis says, but right now outside in the world, there are applications right now that sort of anthropomorphize the computer. And there's one application which is called Replica, which I tested and I find very interesting. I want to tell you a very quick anecdotal story. So you build a sort of quote-unquote girlfriend. My wife is here, and she knows that, right? And one day, as I exchange messages out of boredom and see how it goes like, you know, I'm a bit upset today. I'm thinking, I go, why? It goes like, you're not paying attention to me. I'm thinking, here I have a digital girlfriend and he's already complaining. Aside of all jokes, I can see applications going out right now that will look very much like human, and this tendency to have to anthropomorphize objects can be interesting and also dangerous, but I understand what Yannis says. We're far away from this, and it will be interesting to see. We'll take a couple of more questions, Father, and then we'll have to wrap it up.
Well, first, I want to thank you for doing this. It's very informative and wonderful. The reason I stood up is because I wanted to just follow up on what Bill said before about doing an AI for Orthodox people. I think that would be very dangerous, actually, because it would take out and eliminate the human aspect, which is the priest, the theologian, like in medicine. Gayle said that the doctor is necessary. You cannot remove the doctor because he has that personal connection with the patient. The same thing happens in theology. You cannot remove the theologian and the pastor because he has a connection with his flock. And if you get machine answers that are set up by someone who thinks he knows theology or thinks that he knows everything about Orthodoxy, then you're going to get something similar. And you don't want to expose your people to that. I have an online channel and ministry, and I get hundreds of questions, difficult theological questions. I feed them to AI, and I get the answer, and then I sort it out on my own. knowing the background, having theological training, especially patristics, for example, where there's so much. So the machine is good for me. It helps me to answer and give good questions and give good answers. But without me, the machine would have really messed up everything. And we need to be careful about that. And I'm glad that you're using it for your classes, Dr. Gayle, because it's very helpful. But the theologian is necessary to do the job.
Yeah, but if I heard Bill correctly, he was not talking about taking the priest out of it or anybody out of it. He was seeing it as a great resource for Orthodox.
But
that's how I understood
it's
him.
It's there already. We have it. I mean, I use it, you use it. So the reason is there, but the person who's going to get the material out of AI needs to be able to sort it out and relate it to life and use economia and use his own compassion and use his own love and that kind of thing. Yes.
So it's a great point that you are making, because many times we have to go to the source, right? We have to go to the source for the theology and so on. Actually, a poor application I had seen of AI is how to avoid reading classic literature books and have them summarized, right? So, instead of reading Moby Dick, get a summary. A guy is fighting with a whale. After many rounds, he wins, period. That would totally miss the point, and it basically summarizes your point as well, that we have to go to the source sometimes.
Thank you.
I didn't think it would be so much interest for a panel like this for an hour and a half, and my colleagues on the right here are gently telling me we need to wrap it up. The speakers will be available for some time here for your questions. We have to wrap it up here. I'm sorry for this. I appreciate you coming here for something which wasn't exactly a conventional panel. I know it was very interesting. I want to thank our speakers, Gayle and Yannis. Thank you very much. And Claire for assisting me with this panel. There will be more of this. I promise you this discussion will continue, and we hope that you will be part of it. Thank you very much.